being out in the streets and having no direction is just not where I wanted to be. And my out was being introduced to Little League football and AAU track. And I'd say AAU track because we traveled the country and it allowed me to see other places in the United States outside of Youngstown at an early age.
We're back with one more down. Today we have Charles Perdue Sr., running back, defensive back, high-level track athlete out of Youngstown East High School, class of 1993. Charles Perdue was one of the premier running backs in the City Series through the early 90s, a four-year letterman at East High in football, a four-year letterman in track and field. It's a pleasure for me to get a chance to have a conversation with this man. He was a competitor of mine during our time in high school, and I just have a lot of love and respect for the type of person that he was, the type of athlete that he was, and then the man that he's become. So I appreciate you coming on to my platform today to, give me some insight into who you are and, what your origin story is, and then talking about some of the time that we shared playing this game that we love. So thank you for being on today, Charles.
Absolutely, man. Thank you for having me. Long time coming. You reached out to me about a year or so ago, and so it's been a long time coming, man. I'm happy to finally be able to jump on with you and talk a little bit about Youngstown, man, and the athletes that came out of Youngstown. I mean, it's nostalgia, brother. The memories. You'll never let them go. They'll always be there, man.
I could second that. As we progress through this thing called life, some of the things that you may have taken for granted as a young man become more important to you as an elder statesman.
Absolutely.
How we generally start, we like to get a feel of who the individual is and, what your family dynamic was at home. Can you take us into that in your time growing up in Youngstown on the east side?
Yeah, so I am the youngest of 10, single mother, 3 girls, 7 boys. Grew up primarily on it. Pretty much all my younger life on the east side of Youngstown. We stayed out in the Brooks for a little while. Then we moved over on Quinn Street, which is kind of off of Garland, Truesdale over there. And so, yeah, man, single mother, 10 kids. Not all of us were in the house all at once. I got some older sisters and brothers that are in their 60s and 70s. So they were kind of out of the house. And it was primarily me and my two older brothers, Terry and Jerry Perdue. They came out of East in 85. So, yeah, man, we, it was just a household that, we was always doing things, especially on the holidays and getting together on the holidays. And I watched my two older brothers, play sports and follow in their footsteps. You see all the Steeler paraphernalia back here. I became a Steeler fan because of my two older brothers, Terry and Jerry. I became a football fan really because of them as well, watching them play when they were at East up under Coach Jack. That's a name right there, Coach Jackson. I can remember watching them dudes practice and how Coach Jack was, and it used to fire me up when I was younger. I couldn't wait to get to East.
Having that many siblings and a mother that's guiding you all towards adulthood, I'm sure that you, as the youngest, you got a lot of tempering and probably had to follow the directions of a lot of different people and the advice of a lot of different people. I come from a smaller family of 5 altogether with 3 sisters. For you as the youngest, what's that vantage point and that viewpoint like for you, knowing that you have these siblings that have already kind of forged a path ahead of you?
Yeah. So, the true advantage of it all was, there was pros and cons to it. I got an opportunity to watch older brothers and sisters make mistakes. Got an opportunity to watch them do things that were right as well. You know what I mean? So I was a mama's boy being a baby. I was spoiled. You know what I mean? So a lot of my time was spent observing what they were doing. I didn't necessarily follow my two older brothers around a lot. They were kind of out doing their own thing, but they made time for me here and there, teaching me different things whenever I asked questions. But I was a kid that, my mother went to church, I went to church with her. If my mother went to a funeral, I went to a funeral with her. If she was going on a trip somewhere, I was going with her. So a lot of it was spent up underneath my mom because, she was, my everything. So, and a lot of the things that I did moving forward really was because of her. And, some of the things watching some of the things my older siblings may have done that really brought her, whether it was trauma, whether it was, her feeling down or whatever. I was able to watch a lot of that and understand that that's never a position I wanted to put her in. So that was kind of really the best way to say it, really the foundation into kind of who I would become.
And, you mentioned some of the areas that you lived in and were, raised in. For those that are from the Youngstown area, we know the reputation that the Kimmelbrook homes may have had for other parts of town. And then, Truesdale, Garland area, throughout our time in the 90s, some of that corridor was a place that you had to, be very aware and observant of your surroundings as you're making your way in and out of those neighborhoods. From your perspective, what are the positives that come from growing up in those areas on the east side? And then, what are the things that you saw that you may have decided early on that I'm going to avoid or sidestep some of these things?
Yeah, so the Kimmer Brooks, I was really young when we moved out into Kimmer Brooks. I didn't experience it the way my older siblings did. I was really young. I mean, I seen a few things. I seen a guy get pistol whooped, and um, for the most part, for me, it was almost like a playground because I was so young, man. I was, you know, so I mean, I seen some stuff in the Kimmer Brooks, but not a whole lot. My older brothers and sisters probably could talk to you a little bit more about that. But I've seen a little bit there, and then we kind of probably, if I can remember correctly, we were maybe there a few years before my dad passed away, and some of the life insurance money my mom received from that, she used that as a tool to get us to move us over on Quinn Street, um, early 80s. I was maybe third or fourth grade when we moved, maybe even younger. So that kind of tells you I was really young when we first moved into Killerbrook. So I didn't experience it like my older siblings, but once we kind of moved over there, uh, I can remember just back in the day being in junior high school and the news cameras coming up the north because we had a big fight at North, and they were talking about gangs and stuff then. BCO, Brook City Outlaws, and all these other things. And I was never the kid that like really followed anyone. I was never really a follower. It was really, like I said, I was up underneath my mom a lot, and I did a lot of the things she did and with her. So of course, drugs and violence, and you seeing some of your peers that, you've been going to school with losing their lives. And Youngstown is, it's such a condensed space that, when something like that happens, you usually know the person, or you're maybe one or two people removed of knowing the person. So you always feel it, because if it's not someone that you're directly connected to, someone that is connected to them. So you always feel that hurt, when something like that happens. But to flip that, the positive thing on how it affected me was, I just felt like I knew that, being out in the streets and having no direction is just not where I wanted to be. And my out was being introduced to Little League football and AAU track. And I'd say AAU track because we traveled the country, and it allowed me to see other places in the United States outside of Youngstown at an early age. And that's kind of how the dream became. Like, how do I put myself in the best position where when and if I choose, to spread my wings and go somewhere else, it just put that mentality into me that, I have to work hard at something. I'm not quite sure what it is, but whatever it is, I'm going to work hard at it. And it kind of gave me that sense of get focused on something, and your focus, you got blinders on, and nothing outside those blinders is going to interrupt my path. That was probably, my biggest takeaways from at an early age. Not only watching siblings that, may have done things, but just, people from around the neighborhood. So it just brought the light at an early age. Number one, I'm not going to do anything to upset my mom. I'm not going to embarrass her. And I want her at the end of the day to be proud of me at whatever I do. So that was my goal, was making my mom proud, giving her something to cheer about, to smile about, to talk to her bingo friends about, you know what I mean? So that's kind of really how it all started for me.
Who are your early allies in terms of your friendship bonds and the guys that you kind of came up with, as you're making this entry into youth level sports around Youngstown and participating in football and track?
I mean, there's a lot of guys. I mean, from the football part of it, I started out with, the East Side Broncos, and, with Coach Bolton, Coach Floyd, and all those guys. And it's really too many guys at that time to really kind of go through all of them. But to be honest with you, I had friends, but I would go to football practice and I would come home, and I was a homebody. I didn't really go anywhere or do anything. I didn't really start hanging out with guys until maybe junior high, maybe high school, where I started to develop real strong friendships with guys. I don't know, remember Damian Rhodes, Jason Young, some of those guys I hung out with a lot, but I was really the guy that, I was home. I did my business at football practice or at track practice, and then I was home. I was home just hanging around the house. So that's a tough question, man. It is, because especially, when I started with the Broncos, you had guys that was already there, that was with them. You remember Anthony Howe, Bubba Howe, and them guys. Like, Bubba was a guy when I first started with the Broncos. He was the god of the little Broncos. He had trouble making weight, but like, he was the guy that everybody looked up to, you know what I mean, with the Broncos. Wilkes, it's just so many people, man. And a lot of those guys that played for the East Side Broncos was guys that lived out in the Brooks, that like I remember playing with when I was younger in the Brooks, that, you know what I mean? So it's just too many guys to really just say one or two names, man. I want to pay homage to all of them, all the East Side dudes that I crossed paths with. I never had beef with anybody. Everybody always treated me with respect. I always treated them with respect, and you know what I mean. That's just how it was with me.
I know my first introduction to hearing your name was probably around 8th grade. I spent my 7th grade year doing Little League the last year I could for the Little Penguins, but had visions of playing for Princeton as an 8th grader. And we happened to scrimmage north as a preseason scrimmage over there at Cheney. And that was the first time I ever heard anybody say Charles Perdue. And, we're riding this bus over there, and that's all you keep hearing. Yeah, Charles Perdue, man. I hear he fast. He this. I'm like, who is Charles Perdue? You know what I mean? And I bring that up to say, because the squad we took over there, after that scrimmage, we came back to school that next Monday, and that was when school started. And they cut probably 80% of the dudes that was out there in that scrimmage, myself included, so we didn't get the chance to compete for them that year. And you guys went on to dominate the city competition and go undefeated in league play there. And, I never forgot that name, Charles Perdue. So, as we get to those high school years, I didn't get to play ninth grade, got back into it in 10th grade, but your name was already starting to make waves and enter the conversations around the city. Um, as you go into East and are establishing yourself and, finding your way, what is your mindset and, what is your view of self in the beginning parts of that, given that you had already started to build somewhat of a reputation at the lower levels?
Yeah. So, yeah, I mean, backtrack a little bit on that North and Princeton game. That was my first introduction to real physical football. Was that Princeton and North game, and I can remember coming out of that banged up and bruised up from that. I mean, it was a physical junior high game, like. So, coming into East my freshman year, Coach Jenks, I really just was trying to get a feel for high school football my freshman year. We had some dogs on the team, man. Like I was telling you before, I played running back, but we had some seniors in front of me that were just dogs. Steve Woodbury, he was a track guy. Aldridge Jones, Tank, all around pure talented dude. Football, basketball. I mean, I seen him do some stuff on the basketball court. Like, wow, I didn't know Tank could play basketball too. You know what I mean? Nate Woodard, Fred Harrison, those guys. Then on the defensive side of the ball, I mean, you had guys like Steven Shackelford, Shaq, Big Shaq. So those guys didn't make it easy. It was beat up on freshman day. You know what I mean? Almost every day, whether it was in a locker room or whether it was on the field. So you either had to decide that, you know what I mean, you're going to get up and you're going to punch back or you're going to lay down. And my mentality was like, man, I ain't scared of none of y'all. So I'm going to go out here and I'm going to show you what I can do. And again, like I said, I was never a dude I didn't really talk shit. I didn't really brag about nothing. And my whole thing on it is when I'm out on the field, I want to be laser focused on what I'm doing and just put myself in the best possibility to play some ball, man. And I never went in there with the thoughts of even playing varsity. And I got a shot to play varsity as a freshman. It was mainly on a defensive side of the ball, free safety. I would get in games here and there, but I was playing freshman ball. I played a freshman game. I think the freshman games were like Tuesday, or I don't necessarily really remember, Tuesday or Wednesday, and then the JV game would be like on a Thursday or whatever, and then I dressed and traveled, with the varsity and got my shots here and there. But, those seniors, those guys that was in front of me kind of laid that foundation of, me believing that I could play at that level. Because, I mean, I still had doubts. Like you said, my name was out there. It started to get out there, and, people was recognizing me for track and for football. But you still have doubts in the back of your mind. Can you play at that level of high school football? And like I was telling you before, I began working my freshman year at East as a student helper. And I would show up at the school at 6:30 in the morning, get the school ready for breakfast or whatever, or in the wintertime, shovel, throw down salt, then I'd go through school, then I'd go to football practice, then I'd go clean the third floor. And, from 6 a.m. till 9:30 at night when I got home, that was my entire first freshman year. So it was all about the grind. It was all about putting my time in, and I knew probably the next year, my sophomore year, I was going to give my shot to really start.
Having the benefit of watching your older brothers play some really great football during a high level period for East. You bring up Coach Herman Jackson, who, was tremendous as a coach, a well-respected administrator. And, just the guys that he inspired during his tenure as the coach. We had Tank on here. We had Buster Stanley on here. And, those guys just have glowing things to say about him. I read in an article that you had made a quote years ago about how you didn't have the benefit of a weight room at East and a weight training program at East, but knowing firsthand how you played and you having to play both sides of the ball, you had tremendous speed and vision. That discipline that was instilled in you getting up that early in the morning and starting a task before the school day, still finding the energy to practice, and then having to end your day, cleaning the whole third floor of the high school. What did that discipline and that grind of getting up and meeting that responsibility each day, how did that transfer over onto the field for you and aid you in terms of competition and preparation?
Yeah, so listen, man, like everybody have days, man, where it's a bad day. You don't feel like getting up. You don't feel like doing this. You don't feel like doing that. You got things going on in your life, family things going on in your life. So for me, how it all began with me doing all this, not only, starting to work was really so I didn't have to put the burden on my mom. I have to worry about paying for anything for me. That's how all that started. So I just figured out, man, young, that the only way you're going to get something or have something is you got to put the work in. And you got to have a grind. I don't know where it came from. I can't really explain it. But as it relates to football, you run a ball, you take a tough hit, you get back up, you get in the huddle, you do the play all over again. That translates over into life. You have a bad day, you don't feel like getting up, you don't feel like doing that. That discipline, most people who have any kind of discipline in their life is going to be successful at no matter what you're doing. And again, like, I don't know where that came from. Maybe it was the hunger inside of me. Maybe it was seeing my mother struggle as a single mother. Maybe it was a little bit of all the things that was going on in Youngstown in the streets. And I think it was kind of really a combination of that, of everything. It helped me stay centered because I had a direction and I had a goal. And in order to follow that direction and reach that goal, I had to stay on that path. So that discipline of getting up at 6 o'clock in the morning or 5:30 in the morning, my mother waking me up, walking to the school, you know what I mean, day in and day out. I just had to drive, man. I wanted to be something. And you try to figure out that path to get you to where you're going, and you stay on that path no matter how you feel. It was, days when I was sick and I had the flu and I still went through a full day, You know what I mean? So I can't really explain where it came from and how I adopted that mentality, man. I just would say it was just the environment around me, man, that made me want the best out of me. And I didn't if I was gonna be a headline, it was gonna be a positive headline.
Well, I certainly can attest that your ability and the way that you led your team. You were a captain for the football team. Definitely the guy that everybody looked to in terms of scoring points in track, in the 100, the 200, 4x1 relay, 4x4 relay. And then I always noticed that the guys that you had around you and in your circle, they had that same type of mentality and that same type of go get it attitude. As we talk about the game of football, in particular the City Series competition that you and I both face, and then some of the outer line schools, you had some giant games against competition. I know Boardman, you guys took them down one year, 22-7. In the clips that we watched earlier, you got 2 long touchdowns basically on the same exact play in back-to-back years. What are some of your memories about just competing as a tailback around the area, and some of the games and the moments that jump to your mind as you competed throughout your career there?
Yeah, I mean, that Boardman game you mentioned, I want to say that was probably the best win in high school for me. I don't know what the expectation was when we went out there to play Boardman, but I can tell you what happened right before we came out of the locker room. One of the guys, Demetrius, he had broke his arm and he had a cast on. And we went through all warm up. And then like right before we was getting ready to come out of the locker room before the game started, I don't know if it was the referees or who said that he couldn't play because he had the cast on, and they tried to, pad it up or whatever. And they were saying that he couldn't play. And Coach Jenkins just went crazy. Like he not at any of the refs or anything like that. He just went crazy in the locker room, and he gave us this speech that, like, I can't remember word for word, but it was probably the greatest hype moment of my high school career. And we came out and we beat the shit out of Boardman from start to finish. And I think, a lot of our teachers that was there and a lot of the fans that was there was really surprised at that. And that was the year we thought, like, man, I think we're going to do something this year. And we just wasn't able to maintain that type of passion and that type of play throughout the rest of the year. But that's one game that really stands out. Had a great game. We all had a great game that game. And really outside of that, anytime we went down and played Massillon or Steubenville Big Red, first game of the season every year, we driving down to Steubenville on the bus, and we got cars behind us and everybody blasting their music. That nostalgia coming down to Steubenville Big Red, those games always stood out. Never really beat Steubenville or Massillon. But like those are memories that sticks with me from high school. But that Boardman game is the one that really stands out, man. Like I truly believe that was the biggest win of my high school career.
Well, let's talk about a couple guys that you came up and playing along with. You had a field general in Darnell Bracy
Absolutely.
leading you guys at quarterback. Ortiz out there on the edge. You shared the backfield with a few different people over the course of your time, but in particular, I remember Jermaine and John Fitzgerald being two guys that stood out for me. I always respected how they went about playing because they never quit and they played the same exact way, the same exact intensity from start to finish in every matchup that I've ever seen them in. Who are some of those guys that you would single out or could give insight on playing alongside of as you guys were grinding out wins where you could get them and giving your best efforts against some of the schools that you may have been outmatched against.
Yeah, so you mentioned two. I'm gonna add a third one there, Jason Young. He plays center. I believe Jason could have went. He could have played D1 as center. He had the physical. He had the physical body for it. He had the physical mindset for it. But Jason Young, John and Jermaine Fitzgerald, those three guys were the hardest working guys in the weight room. Those guys put more time in the weight room than I did. Specifically, John. He was a monster, undersized. If you remember him, I think he's 5'5", 5'6", but lethal. He went 150% every play. On and off the field in the weight room, 150%. And it hurt me that he didn't get a chance to play at the next level. I don't know why or what happened or anything like that, but man, that dude was totally dedicated to the game, to the weight room. He was a year older than me, but like that's one thing I remember vividly. John and Jermaine, Jason Young, those guys in the weight room were monsters. And like you mentioned a little bit ago, as far as us not really having a weight program, I mean, we had what I would call somewhat of a weight program. We had weights, a weight room. But it's not until you go and visit some of these other schools where you see that their weight program was somewhat a little better than ours. We didn't have a lot of guys that was dedicated and that was coming into the weight room like they were supposed to. We had a few that was really, really dedicated, and those three were the ones. I can't say enough about John though, because again, I seen this guy make a few tackles in, like I was playing safety and I seen him make a few tackles in front of me, and he was like, he was just so physical and nasty every play. Nicest guy off the field. You know what I mean? Jermaine was like that too. He just wasn't as aggressive as his brother was. And Jason was probably one of the strongest guys on the team as a center. These are the guys, and there's several other guys that I played with, whether watching them play through Little League, through high school, that really should have made it to the next level of college football, and for whatever reason they didn't, whether it was them getting in trouble, whether it was grades or whatever, you know what I mean? I felt like from a talent level, maybe it was a little bit more talented than I was that should have made it to that next level, or that we could be hearing about in the NFL or doing something big. Some people fall for the traps, street life, and some people just don't have the discipline, and people fall off as years goes on. But John was one I wish, man, had that opportunity to play at the next level, man.
And then, as we kind of hone in on some of the backs that were your peers during the time in high school, you got great guys like Herman Benson. Obviously, we got Sylvester Patton over there in our group. Eugene Young was another nice guy that really could run the ball and had a lot of athletic ability. As far as you're concerned, what do you think it is about that period of football when you're, playing out of the eye, wishbone, and it's a run-dominated game during our time coming up? What did you see out of other guys in the area? And then, did any of the performance of other backs in the area motivate you to go harder for yourself?
Oh, absolutely. Herman Benson was a monster. He was a monster out of that wishbone offense that you just couldn't tackle him. And he was a monster, and he had the meanest stiff arm. That dude stiff armed me so bad one time. I went to tackle him, and he put that arm out there, and it was everything, man. So I can remember Coach Jenkins looking at the sideline telling me, "You ain't shit. You ain't shit." So Herb Benson definitely was one of them. Sylvester Patton, me and him, we battled out for the, City Series, Russian title every year. And such a good dude, man. Such a good dude. I love Sylvester. He was just a hard-nosed football player, man. He wasn't the most talented, but again, that motivation, that drive, that effort, that discipline made him the football player he was. So, definitely he stands out because me and him would battle for the Russian title every year. And the only other guy was Herman Benson, man. That dude should have been an NFL running back. He had the size. I mean, he had everything: the size, the vision, the strength. I don't remember exactly, I don't necessarily think he had that much speed, but he had good football speed.
I got the chance to play with you in the MVCA game, and that whole week of us practicing out there in Canfield, and just a congregation of standout guys from all over our area, Mahoning County, Trumbull County. We're putting together this squad to go over here across the line in Sharon, PA, and give it that last go before moving on with either life or the next level of football. My memory takes me back to some of those practices, and you have to correct me if I'm wrong, but it seems like for you were when the lights go on and it's real, this is when I'm going to turn it up, because all week long in practice, you get a carry here and there and make a little contact, and then you follow off to the back of the huddle, and then we get into this game, and you get the ball two, 3 times, and it's 60, 70, 80-yard touchdowns, and it's like, man, where did this come from, man? This dude, they run this fast all week, but you give him the ball and turn them lights on and just get out of his way, you're gonna make some plays. What is that about you and how you approach the game that just allows you to tap into that inner thing that makes you perform when the game is on the line?
Yeah, I mean, it was real cerebral. So that was my first time around other players outside, just as probably your first time practicing with a whole new group of people. And this is an all-star game, so it's the best of each team. And it was me. I don't know, you remember Champ Wolf, Camel. I can't remember what other running backs there were that was there. But for whatever reason, when we was practicing during those weeks, man, like the coaches wasn't really trying to give me a whole lot of plays or whatever. Like, and I didn't take it as if they was playing favorites or whatever. I mean, they really like Champ, and Champ is a great dude, man. Him really, really good friends, man. And I'm never the dude that's gonna be jealous of anybody getting theirs, man. Never. And you'll never hear me complain about it. I just was never a complainer. I was just always a believer. All right, well, if it's going this way, well, when I get my shot, I just got to make the best of it. And it just motivated me. So I knew the day of the game that, man, the minute I touch the ball, like it's going to be lights out, it's going to be on. And like, I just carried that mentality with me wherever I go, wherever I go and whatever I do. And that was my whole mentality that week of practice leading in. I remember the guys from, can't remember their names, but they were from Hubbard. And they looked like grown damn men out there, dude. And I can remember them just all in my ear, all in my ear, all in my ear. And like, oh, we thought you was all of this and all of that. You know what I mean? Because I used to ride out to practice with a couple of dudes from Rand. And we used to talk about it every day, how the dudes from Hubbard was just, they was like grown men and how they was handling them during practice. And I wasn't there to prove to any of those guys or that, you know, I'm the best, or I'm just gonna play the game and leave it out on the field. And then I'll let y'all decide on who did what, who's the best, or you know what I mean? Like, do you remember me jawing with anybody during practice?
Absolutely not. You know, you were methodical and businesslike, you know, but it was just such a shock how explosive you were in that game. And you know, looking back at it now, having the experience of having a chance to coach at the high school level and a little bit at the college level, you know, you understand that a lot of teams have guys that are great players and have great ability, but because of the makeup of their team, their talents might not be able to be displayed fully because they're counted on to do so much. And I would certainly put you in that category. You know, I think you always were the man that you were on the football field, no matter where you were placed at. But sometimes the scheme and then you know, the depth just didn't allow your talent to be fully displayed for what it was. You know, and you kind of stating it that, you know, you weren't the type of person to call attention to yourself or self-promote what you thought your abilities were. You just went out there and did it, and you left the evaluating to those that you were competing against. So I think that's why your name kind of, you know, stands the test of time over all of these years, you know, long after you've had a carry. You know, you get that chance to go on to that next level to Youngstown State and play for Coach Jim Tressel. You're staying home, you know, a stone throw away from your neighborhood, and, you know, your mom's able to know that you're going to be able to have a chance and opportunity, and she'll be able to get there. You know, what was it that made Youngstown State the place for you and the decision for you to continue your football career?
So it came down to Youngstown State and Louisville. Louisville first was recruiting me for running back, and then they started talking about moving me to receiver. And it was like, I think who went to Louisville? Was it Stallworth? It was some NFL player. I can't remember that went to Louisville, and it was like, you remind me of him. We would love, we would offer you today if you would come and play wide receiver. And that right there was the end of the conversation for me. You know what I mean? It was like, I'm a running back. YSU had a lot more going for it because it was home and my mom could come to every game. Louisville was so far away. So it was important for me, for her to be able to come to my games and family and different things like that. And I don't know if you've ever sat down and had a conversation with Tress, or if you ever met Tress, but he has a way of making you, feel comfortable. He's a guy that you can meet today, and 20 years later, you run into him and he'll remember your name. And then watching his success at YSU, that came into play as well. And so that at the end of the day, I couldn't tell you, even if Louisville was going to allow me to play running back, that I would have went there. I still think I probably would have chose YSU, because Tress we had a principal, Mrs. Hooks, my freshman and sophomore year, that Tress, he was coming up to the school. I don't know who he was coming to see, but he had Miss Hooks walk him into the cafeteria to point me out when I was a freshman or a sophomore. He couldn't talk to me or anything like that, but I remember him and Mrs. Hooks standing in the hallway and her pointing me out. So I knew and was very aware of YSU interest in me when I was a freshman or a sophomore. I can't remember which year it was. So ultimately, that's why I decided to stay at YSU. And coming in my freshman year at YSU, you mentioned the MVC All-Star game. And then after that, I went and played in the Big 33 game in Pennsylvania, which is Ohio All-Stars against Pennsylvania All-Stars, which we got the hell beat out of us in that game. But I had a great game. Anyway, I had been playing football that entire summer going into my freshman year at YSU. So when I came into camp, I was in full shape. I was already at the top of the game because I had never stopped training and working out that entire summer. So I was ready my freshman year to go and compete at YSU.
And what is that experience like? Kind of getting to hit the field early before really understanding the nuances of the college game. And not only that, you have a tremendous coach. There's already a system in place that's built for success, but you got two dogs in front of you in terms of Tamron Smith and Darnell Clark. What is that experience like for you, getting acclimated to that college level game and participating at that level in a program that's ready to compete for national titles?
Yeah. So first, to speak on Tamron and Darnell, I mean, of course, like you said, two dogs, man. Just two dogs, two clowns. They always had. This is, what I mean? But when it came down to business, they was about business during game day. But like, they were just two characters, you know what I mean? So coming in, all the hoopla guys hearing about me, you had some guys that's, Brace was already there. So, Brace was there talking shit about me. He had them Florida boys all hyped, like the Florida boys in my ear. Yeah, man. Yeah. I'm going to kill you. Like, you know what I mean? So, coming in, like I said, man, I was like in top shape already because I have been playing football all summer. You know what I mean? And Coach Tressel told me from the beginning that I was going to get a shot at being a third back. And he just left it at that. And I came in with the mentality like, a lot of, I really studied the game. Like even in high school and even like when we was at the practices for the all-star games and stuff, when they was installing offense and stuff like that, like I would pay attention. I knew uh, the blocking schemes. Like I would stand back and when the play would go on, I was watching the blocking schemes on certain plays. So when I got to YSU, of course, it is way more detailed. The practices are way more detailed. And when we would be, film, once you get to that college level, it's a lot of film. And there's a lot of teaching. And especially during camp, a lot of teaching and a lot of film. And I was soaking all that in. I learned the blocking schemes and what the lineman was doing and where the hole was designed to go. And also the offensive line calls on if they had to change up their blocking scheme or whatever. So I was able to learn that. I was very good at that. Like, and I never really talked about it, but it just kind of like came naturally to me. And when I got my shot, to run the ball at practice, I was probably fifth on the depth chart, but by the time we was closing camp, getting ready to go into season, I was third because I made some big plays in a red and white game. I made some big plays, man. And I just went out there again, that focused mentality. I didn't talk shit. I was mainly quiet the whole practice, and I just went out there and done my work. You know what I mean? And the physical ability part of it was the natural part for me. You know what I mean? It's, the mental part of the game. I'm a freshman. You know what I mean? And I'm being thrown into this. But what I had over the other guys was like I really studied the game and I really paid attention when we were in film session and when my running back coach one day we was sitting there. One of Tress's favorite plays was Dave, and basically it's just a down block off tackle. Dave, Dave, and he asked, "Can somebody come up and draw a play up?" And as a freshman, I raised my hand and I went up there and I drew the play up exactly how it was supposed to be based off of the defensive front. You know what I mean? So those were the little things that I think that I did that gave the coaches trust in like, yeah, he could be our third back. You know what I mean? And you talking about Tamron and Darnell both rushing for over 1,000 yards. And as a freshman, I rushed for 700 yards. So just a true testament to being prepared. You can have all ability in the world, but you have to be ready in that moment. And I just was ready in that moment as a freshman to
play. You get the experience of playing for a national title that very first year. You guys defeat Marshall. I think it was 17-5 to bring that back home. And then, Darnell and Tamron are both exiting out of the program as their time has ended. Going into that second year, you have some adversity as a lot of guys end up having throughout their career playing college football. And you had this knee injury. How did that, impact you, knowing that you were on such a path of trajectory and success and being counted on to be that next great running back in Tressel's system? what does that do to reshape your view of football? And, does it spin you off onto a new path in life that, you hadn't considered before?
It was shattering for me because that was the first major injury I had, and I sat down an entire season. You know what I mean? Like that 94 season, it would have been me and Sean Patton in the backfield. I mean, they went undefeated. They won a national championship, but it would have been a dynamic force. And I just sat there like imagining like me and Sean Patton both in the backfield, and trust, and they was ready for it. But it changed the trajectory and the path of my life because it just gave me too much time to sit back and just think, I graduated. One second. I graduated in August of 93. I mean, in June of 93, and my son was born in August of 93. And when that knee injury happened, it gave me a lot of time to sit back and kind of just think about him. And me growing up without my dad in my life, it just gave me kind of like a new perspective of like, man, I've been beating my body up all these years. And, high school, I worked and played multiple sports and just wore myself out and beat my body up. And now I'm laying here with a torn ACL, and how much more of this do I want to endure? And my son was young, and him and his mother, they were living in an apartment, and so a lot of people thought I struggled with grades at YSU. Grades was never an issue with me. Grades was just, it's what I put into it. Like, and so it wasn't, I did not flunk out of YSU. I kind of made a conscious decision that do I still want to continue to beat my body up? And I want to be able to be there for my son. So, I mean, it was probably not even after my injury. I mean, I managed to rehab and come back, and I even started playing again and was on that path to full recovery and coming back. But that I had lost that dog mentality by then. It gave me too much time to really sit back and think about life. You know what I mean? Like, am I chasing an NFL dream? At one time I was, you know what I mean? Maybe this is what was not intended for me. Maybe the NFL wasn't intended for me, or whatever the case may be. And, I had arguments with my brothers about, you on my case, like huge arguments, like you walking away from something, you don't regret it. And so that injury changed my mentality entirely. For the first time, I was able to sit around and kind of think and ponder, like, what else can I do outside of football and run a fast 100 meters? You know what I mean? And that it began that chain of thought for me, that changing of thought process of I'm just an athlete and I want to go to the NFL and I want to make millions of dollars. And it just was like, man, I think I want to be a good father. You know what I mean? So yeah, it changed a lot.
I think for anybody who invests and puts their time and energy into athletics for a long period of time, a lot of us, we start off as little boys idolizing things that we see on TV. And then, as you go up and climb those next levels, trying to chase that dream, you start to realize it gets further away from fun and more towards business the higher that you go.
Oh yeah.
And I think the difficulty for all of us as athletes is, coming to terms and grips with uh, who am I outside of this athletic identity, and how do I start to release some of this need for competition and this drive to prove myself. And then, for some of us, we find that very easily because it's just not in the cards for us anyway. For others, I think, once it's exhausted, then, you're forced into this wider world of, sink or swim. And,
Yeah.
Based on what you just said, you had your son as a key motivator and turning your eyes towards other areas and other endeavors. And, I think the proof is in the pudding. You certainly provided an atmosphere to allow him to flourish and be a successful athlete in his own right, bearing your name, that comes with its own pressures. And then you do land on your feet and find a career and the other version of Charles Perdue that doesn't have to have a ball in his hand or doesn't have to get from point A to point B in less than 10 and a half seconds. What is it about your work life and your work career that gives you satisfaction and may have some of those same parallels to being a competitive athlete?
So yeah, that competitive, being competitive as an athlete, I just took that and translated it over into real life. You know what I mean? I struggled for some years on, who I was and what I wanted to do after YSU, and did a lot of, some days, doing nothing, some days, weekends drinking, going out to party, and you know what I mean? So yeah, it was a struggle, and I questioned whether I made the right decision on that or not. And but that desire to still do something was there. And it was just really a matter of figuring out what I wanted to do and how I wanted to do it. And I know, I got married, me and my son's mother, we got married, and, I started a family life, bought a house, everything, and went through a divorce. Still trying to figure out my path of, career and what I wanted to do. I knew I didn't want to do blue collar work, only because I didn't want to see myself at 50 years old, going out, I don't know, doing labor work. Like, I didn't want to do anything physical. I said I beat my body up enough that anything I do is going to be mentally, not physically. So, and that kind of started my journey into getting into sales, starting out in a call center, selling, and, I'm like perfecting skills. Like, my whole thing was build a resume, build a resume, build a resume. And you know what I mean? And so I just focused on, trying to hone my skills in selling, and being able to walk up to anybody and speak to anybody and sell them anything. And that just kind of progressed into insurance. One day I was just doing research on insurance and how to get insurance license. How do you get your, Series 6 license and all of this? And I got a job at a bank, and that's how I was able to get licensed and get a Series 6 to do annuities and life insurance and health insurance. I knew, kind of, the people that really made, how do you make six figures without a college degree, was my train of thought. How do I do it? And I knew that path was in sales, and I just kind of started down that journey, and then went through a divorce, and my son graduated high school, went through a divorce, and I'm in Youngstown. Like, well, what's next? I feel like I can't grow here anymore. I feel like if I want to grow, I got to travel to Cleveland or Pittsburgh for the major opportunities. And the company I was working for at the time had a position that was available down here in Charlotte. The sales manager that was down here, I was in training with, got to know her really well. And she told me 2 years before that, if I ever got an opportunity down here, I want you to come. And she called me one day and said, I got an opportunity. The only bad part, this was like in January of 16. She was like, the only problem is I need you down here by May. You know what I mean? And I said, I'm interested. I'm worried about the logistics of moving and stuff. She's like, don't worry about that. We're going to give you such and such amount to move. Enough said. And with that, dude, like my son was kind of, away doing his kind of thing. And I said, this is an opportunity that I can't pass up. And I packed up what I could fit in my car, man, and got on the highway and moved down here in May of 16 with just what I had in my car. And when I got to my apartment, I went to Walmart and bought an air mattress. You know what I mean? And so that taking risks and knowing that I'm going to do whatever it takes to get to where I want to be all started with football and track. I just translated into everyday life. And was it easy? It wasn't easy leaving my family. You know what I mean? Like, I got a whole bunch of family still in Youngstown. And I miss them, but it was the best decision for me at the time, man. And it just went back to when I hurt my leg and I decided, like, what am I doing? Like, do I still want to go out there on the football field and beat my body up more? And you know what I mean? So just led to where I'm at today. You know what I mean? I've been down here 10 years now, and I moved myself up into Blue Cross Blue Shield, and I got a full-fledged career. So you just never know where life takes you, man, when you kind of put your mind to it, and you willing to accept the ups and downs of your decision, and are you gonna fight through it? Like, translated into football, like, the game before you got beat 56-0. Next week you come back out to a game, or you gonna come into that game with the energy of, I'm gonna go out here and play to win, or I know we gonna get beat again, so it don't matter. No, I go out there and play to win every game. You know what I mean? So I wake up and I play to win every day.
The title of our show is One More Down. We always end with that philosophical question, to kind of get the subject to think and summarize their thoughts and their feelings in that moment. With all the great performances that you've had over the course of your athletic career, the swift transitions that life has taken you through in terms of, family members leaving, new opportunities arising and coming in and out of your life. If Charles Perdue had that one more down to repeat over again, what would that be for you? Who would be with you in that scenario? Could you set that up and give a summarization of if you had that one more down?
Let me see. So my one more down is with my wife, my current wife. I got remarried since I've been down here. And this might be the emotional part. So, in 2023, I got diagnosed with acute myeloid leukemia. Very, very rare blood disease. I spent 2.5 months in the hospital. I had a 30-day stint of just straight chemo. Came home for maybe about 2 weeks. Went back in for another 30-day stint. I had to get a stem cell transplant. So my brother, one of the twins, Jerry, was a match. And that second 30 days, they take you to the brink of death, right? They wipe you out completely. They white blood cell count in my immune system. They had to totally wipe me down to zero. You talking so weak that you can't get up to use the restroom. Nurses having to come in and bathe me and help me use the restroom. Humbling moments. Got the stem cell transplant. Came home probably, I think it was January 24. And my wife, was a trooper for me. I could barely get up and walk 2 steps without being totally out of breath. And I was on lockdown probably for about 6 months, like where it was COVID all over again. Weighing 130 pounds. So, we 2.5 years out. So my moment as you speak is where I'm at now and how my wife helped me get through that mentally. Physically, the physical part was really me pushing myself. Like, they told me it will only get better if you get up and push yourself and walk and work out and do this and do that. Dude, I went from 180 pounds to 130 pounds. Skin peeling off because the chemo burned me so bad that my entire body shed a skin. New skin growing, fingernails fell off, hair all out. So this is what Youngstown and all the sports and all the competition, it prepared me for that. It made me strong enough to endure that. So, that's what I'll say on that. And it's, my wife and where I am today. Anytime you go through ups and downs, it's preparing you for something, So hurting my knee and making me sit down and walk away from something that I was so good at really was a second thought until I went through this. You know what I mean? So, yeah, man. Youngstown strong, bro.
You know, when you hear things like that, and you know, it's just a peek into, you never know what someone is enduring, what someone is dealing with, and some of these things that society holds at the top of the apex, you know, and tells you this is what it's about. Your summary and looking death right in the eye and having someone there to help you bounce back from that and become whole again. That's really what it's about, you know, being a good person, surrounding yourself with even greater people, and enduring through those things that you don't know are over the next horizon. You know, me getting to know you as a athlete and having a vision of you as a person that I had to prepare and be at my best to stop, it pales in comparison with the man that exists outside of the confines of a gridiron or you know, the 400 meters of a track. You know, you kind of touching on the things that are most important in life in the face of uncertainty. You know, I've gone through a divorce. You know, that becomes more commonplace in this day and age, but I think because of the time period that we grew up in, it's just important for us to be fathers and be present and give and do all that we can to make sure our name and our legacy survives. Having you on has been a pleasure today, not only just for the nostalgia and just getting to connect with you and know that you're okay, but actually being taught and inspired to keep going, to keep performing those tasks and those exercises that made you a great athlete, to deal with the rest of the time that the Lord has given us. So I thank you today for being a guest, sharing your athletic story, but even more so being a man and being transparent about the serious side of life and all that comes with and all that entails. So thank you, my brother, for sharing your story with me today.
Very welcome, man. One more down, bro. One more down.